Good afternoon. Yvonne Stewart here with you in our study of Luke's Gospel. We are digging through the whole Gospel of Luke, digging for, seeking God for the treasures that he has contained in there just for us. Today we're in chapter 20, so hit pause real quick and read through the whole chapter because we are actually going to cover all of it today, and then hit play again and join me as we study Luke's Gospel, chapter 20, verses 1 all the way to 47. In this chapter, Luke begins to record the somewhat desperate attempts of the various sects of religious leaders to entrap Jesus. They are determined to see him killed, but they must have a good reason. They figure the best way to do that is to get Jesus to openly declare his claim to be their Messiah, which in their eyes would be blasphemy, punishable by death. Jesus will eventually make that claim openly, but on his term, not theirs. Because Jesus truly is God, he is aware of every trap, every form of false sincerity, every effort to undermine him, and he does not give them the satisfaction. Imagine trying to get one up on God. One of the things that has irritated the religious leaders throughout Jesus' ministry is the awesome authority that he walked in and spoke with. He turns every question back on them and stunningly glorifies God in his every interaction. It's so exciting to watch. In verse 9, Luke continues his theme of showcasing the wickedness and the hypocrisy of the religious leaders. What I notice in this passage is that the leaders wanted to arrest Jesus for no other reason than that he was exposing them. The religious leaders valued their reputation most of all. Jesus' exposition of the true nature of the religious leaders happened all throughout his ministry. He was constantly telling people to beware of the yeast of the Pharisees, pointing out how they love to sit in the best places, be recognized in public, and receive the praises and commendations of men. Perhaps some of them truly did have a heart to serve God and lead people to him. But as a whole, they were just puffed up with pride and could not stand for anyone to tell them that they were wrong. It wasn't only the religious leaders of Jesus' day that were like that. Sadly, it had been that way for centuries. In fact, the horrible leadership of Israel's leaders and their shameful treatment of all the prophets that God has sent to warn them away from their evil behavior is one of the major reasons for God's judgment resulting in that Babylonian exile hundreds of years prior. And they still hadn't learned their lesson. Stunningly, it gets even worse than that. As many of the prophetic things Jesus said during his earthly ministry were, the story in verse 13 was shocking to its hearers. And though only a story, it is indeed prophetic. Just as the religious leaders of generations past had murdered many of God's prophetic messengers sent to warn Israel and turn them from their evil ways, so they will treat the cherished Son of God. Why? Why would Israel's religious leaders be so intent on killing those who come with the very words of God for them? I can think of several reasons. One, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. Two, they enjoy their sin, pride, too much to change. Three, they don't want anyone telling them what to do. And four, they want what belongs to God for themselves. This last one is perhaps the worst of all. Wanting what belongs to God is what puffed up Lucifer with pride and actually caused his expulsion from heaven. The same reasons that kept the religious leaders from honoring God and his servants is what keeps many people today from hearing the word of the Lord and responding to it appropriately. This is quite a dangerous situation to be in. You may find it a terrible thing to happen, as Jesus' hearers did. But God is looking for faithfulness. If the leaders currently in place refuse to steward what belongs to him properly, their end will not be well, and they will lose what they tried so hard to hang on to. The people listening to Jesus' proclamation in verse 17 about what was about to happen to him, as well as his verdict against those who will carry it out, were overcome with emotion that such travesty could happen. What they didn't seem to realize is that it was all prophesied far in advance. Jesus was revealing things that were already spoken about for centuries and even millennia prior. In these verses, Jesus pulls out yet another prophecy about himself and connects it with the current situation. The prophecy about the stone the builders rejected and became the chief cornerstone is from Psalm 18, a messianic psalm, and is filled with rejoicing over God's plan, not heartache. Jesus is going to be rejected. He is the stone sent to build the church, the cornerstone. Though rejected as fitting in with the current religious system, he is the rock the new covenant is built on. As the message about Jesus and his gospel go throughout the world, there will be many who reject it as surely as Israel's religious leaders rejected Jesus. But that rock cannot be broken. The revelation about Jesus and his kingdom will cause many to stumble because they will not be able to accept it. And it will ultimately crush those who work against it, even to annihilate it from the earth. But this rock cannot be made to disappear. It cannot be buried, and it cannot be broken. The religious leaders of Israel had clearly been proven by Jesus to be wicked and not to be trusted, as verse 19 makes abundantly clear. So they sent some men that Jesus did not know to pretend to be honest seekers. Their strategy to flatter Jesus was to flatter Jesus in the hopes of trapping him. But the religious leaders underestimated Jesus yet again. Of course, Jesus can see right through their trickery. And in a stunning display of divine wisdom, Jesus shares a timeless earthly principle. The right of earthly governments to charge taxes and exert authority over their citizens and the subjects is a law that God himself has ordained and expects his followers to willingly submit to. Obeying earthly authorities is actually a part of what we owe God. This answer has a way of striking silence even into our own objections of government today. In this chapter, the religious leaders first tried to make demands of Jesus. Then they tried to trick him through flattery. In verse 27, another sect endeavors to trip Jesus up with the ridiculous. I think one of Luke's points in writing these three accounts together is to show that nothing makes Jesus stumble. He can answer anyone from anywhere with truth and wisdom. And at the same time, Jesus gets right to the heart of people's most closely held beliefs, especially when they're wrong, while also giving us some unexpected insight into how life will be lived in heaven. He drops a bomb of truth that cannot be ignored or disputed by these religious leaders. God is the God of the living, not the dead. And this is proven by the same man, Moses, who the leaders were so bent on obeying to the nth degree. Wow, Jesus. In verse 41, Jesus is done with the foolishness of these religious leaders. His time is short and he still has some revelation to impart, warnings to give, and prophecies to fulfill. One of the prophetic titles for the Messiah is Son of David, because God prophesies to David that the Messiah would come through his lineage. This is why during Jesus' earthly ministry, when anyone in Israel called Jesus Son of David, they were acknowledging their belief that he was the Messiah. Psalm 110, which the verse Jesus quoted is from, is also a messianic psalm prophesied by David. The use of Lord, all caps, is the Hebrew word Jehovah and always refers to God as his proper name. The use of the word Lord, lowercase, is used in the Bible hundreds of times to refer to a man that is a husband, a prince, a king, or a master. It is used only a few times in reference to God, as it is in this verse from Psalm 110. David knew that the Messiah would be called the Lord of all lords, including himself as king. So he could rightly refer to Jesus as his own Lord, lower caps. God the Father as Lord, upper caps, says to David's Lord, lower caps, to sit as his right hand. I hope this is making sense to you. This has been accomplished. One day soon, the rest of that prophecy is going to be fulfilled when every knee bows at the name of Jesus and every tongue confesses that he is Lord. Further, Satan and every demon will be finally, fully eradicated from existence. I love how fearless Jesus is. After showcasing the wisdom of God to defeat the traps and schemes of the religious leaders again and again, he decides to make a point in verse 45, just in case his disciples and the crowd hadn't yet seen through the smug facade of these leaders. James 3:1 says, "Not many should become teachers, for they will be judged more strictly." When a person is in a position of leadership over God's people, they are called to study to show themselves approved. But then they aren't to go around flaunting how much they know and comparing themselves to others who don't know as much. Pride does not gain God's favor. He is simply not impressed with how big a person puffs themselves up to be. Jesus modeled servant leadership. He preached and practiced humility. He made clear throughout his entire earthly ministry that God is impressed with meekness when we serve people out of love and compassion and when we put others ahead of ourselves. The positions we create for ourselves on earth are going to determine the positions that God gives us in eternity. The first will be last and the last will be first. Don't think you can trick the Lord either. He knows your heart. Well, that's all for today. I hope you received some revelation from God about how to relate to and honor Jesus and how to model his life or your life after his. I put all the scriptures that I read or refer to in today's lesson in the description of this video. Make sure you check them out. Check them out in their context. Dig up some more treasures for yourself and even feel free to share it with me. I'd love to see and hear about what God is showing you. And then make sure you join me again on Monday at 12 noon Central Time. Have a blessed week.